Hi there. Don't worry, it's not sponsored this time. Darktide recently released its new class tree overhaul, and many more players are enjoying the game. They still didn't fix toughness being lame, and the crafting system and the materials system isn't fixed yet, and the bosses still don't reward you for killing them, but I'm not here to talk about that. After the overhaul, the game is significantly more fun. Even myself, on Darktide's initial launch, would prefer to still play Vermintide 2, but now I find it kind of difficult to go back to Vermintide 2. I'm an extremely talented gamer, and I know people are having issues with the base gameplay and combat, so I'm here to lend my amazing talent to assist anyone who wants to try this game but is having a hard time getting into it. Let's discuss some base steps first and some ground rules. First off, I'm going to assume that you're new to combat in this part. When I get to builds, I'm going to assume you're level 30. I can't help you build a character if you don't have any skill points. Combat-wise, there's a handful of things at your disposal to help you get started. There's attacks, charge attacks, chains, blocks, push attack, special moves, and dodges. Attack is attack. It's pretty simple, I hope. Certain weapons have unique attack patterns that can be manipulated to hit certain parts of the enemy. Every enemy has a weak point. It's almost always the head, except on certain exceptions. Learning to target the weak point will always benefit you, but you shouldn't freak out if you don't hit it. Damage is damage, and enemies can't heal. Charge attacking is simply holding the attack button. This isn't always better, but it has different properties than a normal attack. Some charge attacks change the swing direction heavily, some deal less damage than hitting with a normal attack. However, in Darktide, there are enemies that have armor. Sometimes it's flak or carapace. Flak armor isn't super thick, but is highly resistant to all forms of damage, and carapace armor is extremely thick, and if you don't have a weapon with armor penetration, you're not going to hurt the enemy unless you hit him in the head. Heavy attacks bypass this downside. Heavy attacking armor with a weapon that does not penetrate armor will penetrate the enemy and deal damage. You can bypass this by hitting the weak point or landing a crit. A good mindset is axes and blunt weapons penetrate armor all the time, whereas blades don't. So differentiating between these can help you. Learning to alternate between light and heavy attacks will also help you stay alive. You don't always want to heavy attack, and you don't always want to light attack. Chain attacks are when you continuously attack in a chain. All weapons have chains. Some weapon perks only activate on chains, so striking the enemy once will not count as a chain. Striking them twice or more will. Heavy attacks also have chains, but don't get it mixed up. Perks that activate on chain attacks do not work on heavy chain attacks, only light ones. Chains alternate the swing type of your weapon, so learning their pattern is a good idea. Blocking is a staple feature of Fat Shark's slasher games. Blocking blocks all damage. Blocking is directly attached to your stamina. Every bar of stamina increases the amount of attacks you can block. You can't block gunfire except for one of Ogryn's weapons. When you run out of stamina and block a hit, it staggers you, leaving you completely open to attacks, so be careful. Here's a great tip for blocking. Blocking works in all directions. You don't need to face an enemy to block their attack, so if you're being snuck up on, just block. There is a downside though. Enemies blocked that you're not facing deal more stamina damage than facing one, so make sure to be careful of your stamina. Next is pushing. Pushing is extremely powerful. In exchange for some of your stamina, you can push an infinite amount of enemies in your push cone. Depending on the strength of the push, this can knock them over or stagger them slightly. Regardless, it's an opening. Make sure to be careful. Your block and your push are tied to the same stamina bar, so running out will leave you defenseless. A follow-up to pushing is the push attack. Pushing and keeping the button pressed will do a push attack. It's a unique attack that comes with its own attack swing. The attack itself doesn't cost stamina, but the push does. Weapons with high amounts of crowd control will be able to benefit from multiple push attacks. Your special move is a weirdly keybinded move. Look in your controls to find it and either rebind it or get used to it. All weapons in Darktide have a special move. Sometimes it's something not entirely useful at first, and other times it's required to fully benefit from the weapon. Learning to utilize this move will be helpful, so there's no reason to not try to use it. And dodging. Dodging in Fat Shark games is a power move. Pressing jump in any direction but forward will dodge. Dodging does not make you invincible. It makes the enemy lose their lock on. If you walk around an enemy, they'll track you and hit you. Dodging makes the enemy lose this tracking and they can miss. Dodging, then going back into the attack, will still hurt you. However, dodging does not require stamina, but it does have a cooldown. You cannot spam dodge as it has diminishing returns after multiple uses. Learn to abuse this mechanic in hordes and on special enemies to make them miss and open to counterattacks. There's also sprinting, but sprinting is mostly used for ranged enemies. Sprinting from melee enemies will still have them attack you. There's also sliding, but again, mostly used for ranged enemies. A tip though, you can dodge then immediately slide to gain extra distance in dodge frames. This is the basic gist of how the game works. These tips can change based on multiple things: difficulty, modifiers, weapons, and teammates. But assuming we're working with the optimal team, which is one of everyone, these rules should stay the same almost every time. One thing you need to keep in mind though is unless you plan on making the game a living hell, you're gonna take damage. Don't be demotivated by it. You're gonna go down and you're gonna get hit, and that's okay. What's not okay is not learning from it. You went down 4 times to a regular grunt? No big deal, just get up and kill it. You'll get better, it's alright. You will not be doing damnation high-intensity shock troop gauntlets right out of the gate. You shouldn't be thinking like that. You just need to focus on not going down. You can get hit 100 times, just don't go down. Now, let's test your ears. Listen. Again. One more time. That noise. That is the wind-up noise. When you're about to be stabbed or hit by an enemy you can't see, this noise will play. Learning to listen to this noise and reacting in time by dodging or blocking will help you stay alive. Gunners have one too, but it's significantly less forgiving. Dodging is incredibly helpful, so it's important you not only learn to block and listen, but to react to these calls accordingly. Real quick, I'm going to explain toughness. Toughness is this blue bar here. It has a couple things going on with it. So let's assume that 100 toughness is the maximum you can get right now. It's not, but for the sake of the video, bear with me. When toughness is at maximum, you can absorb 1 melee hit from an enemy without taking any health damage. If an enemy hits you hard enough to go past your maximum toughness, it will still hurt you. It is not a shield. Toughness is not a shield. Toughness, when it is below 100, turns it into damage mitigation, or damage reduction, never absorption. Let's say you have 99 toughness instead of 100. The next melee strike you take will deal 1% of its total damage to your health instead of the full hit. So if you're at 50% toughness, you'll lose more toughness on taking that hit, and 50% of the damage done to you will hit your health along with your toughness. I don't like this. I never liked this. And it did not always used to be like this. Luckily, there's many ways to keep your toughness up, and full to keep you protected. On top of that, toughness protects against all ranged attacks. As long as you have toughness, guns cannot damage your health. This doesn't make you invulnerable, it just means you can avoid being melted at scary distances. As long as you're killing and keeping true to your new skills, you can manage having a lot of toughness. Now let's talk about the enemies. Now this guide was released in October of 2023, so if there's more enemies than I can cover here, I can't help you. But for now, Groaners and Poxwalkers. These are regular grunts of Darktide. They come in huge, massive hordes that can be a big problem if you don't know how or don't have the equipment to deal with them. Luckily, Poxwalkers are unarmored and fairly weak health-wise. They'll still fuck you up without question if you're not careful. They do have a perk to them that makes them actually dangerous that not many people realize. Poxwalkers deal corruption damage, meaning if a Poxwalker hits you at all, you will permanently lose max HP until you take a Medicae. It's not a lot, and it's manageable, but you should keep this in mind when playing. They can be dealt with easily and without much effort, but don't assume they're just trash mobs. They'll put you down just as easily. Next are the regular Scab and Dreg grunts. Scab enemies are black armored, and Dregs are yellow, mostly unarmored. These are just as common, with more health and sometimes armor and guns. They can't deal corruption damage like Poxwalkers, but they make up for it by having more health, hitting harder, and if you're far enough from certain types of them, they'll shoot you. Aim for the head like usual, or find parts that are unarmored and kill them easily. Next are elites. Scab Gunners, Maulers, and Dreg Gunners, Ravagers, and Rangers. Gunners are a higher health grunt that can lay down heavy and suppressive fire that eats through toughness and can suppress you into having less movement or no movement at all. Attack as usual, shoot, or close the distance. Maulers are heavy damage dealers, slow but big threats. Their front side is armored heavily, their chest is flak armor, and their head is carapace. I suggest aiming for the chest or getting behind them where the armor is weaker. Ravagers and Ragers, dual-wielding crack addicts that can't be pushed once they start their attack pattern. They can be staggered, just not pushed. They're very weak to ranged and explosives. I advise against getting close to them, but sometimes you don't have a choice. Next are Ogryn enemies. There's 3 common elites: Crushers, Bulwarks, and Reapers. Crushers are covered head to toe in carapace armor and are extremely dangerous. They hit extremely hard and can even bypass toughness with a hard enough hit. They're extremely slow and have no range, so use explosives or armor penetrating weapons. Bulwarks are unique. They have their own shield that is neither carapace or flak. It's as if you're hitting a wall. Unless you have a weapon that can attack through the shield, try to avoid the shield entirely, as you can't hit through it. Their arms and legs are covered in carapace armor, but their chest and head are not. They don't hurt too bad, and you can bait out their attack and make them open to attacks, but if there's a lot of them, try to use explosives. as their shields might get in the way. Or try staggering them, as they run on the same stamina feature that we use and can be staggered to move the shield out of the way. Last is the Reaper. I personally feel that this is the weakest elite in the game. His arms, legs, and one singular shoulder is carapace protected. The rest is completely unarmored. They're extremely vulnerable to stagger, they can be suppressed, they have very low armor, and they stand still when attacking. However, they have some of the highest suppression and firepower of all ranged enemies. If you piss one off that's far away, it'll become a really big problem. But left alone, they just turn into a high health gunner. Specials and disablers.
Bro, everyone's going to the fucking apocalypse that's up there.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Oh my god!
First is the Hound. Hounds have low health, high speed, and can disable the player if attacked. If the Hound manages to disable someone, they deal direct corruption damage. If a dog does too much corruption damage to a player, it will kill them. They can be staggered and dealt with by shooting them, dodging them, and pushing them during a pounce, and paying attention to their audio cues. Next is Sniper. Extremely low HP and can be staggered from immense distances with shit like the auto pistol. They're pussies, like most people with scoped weapons in video games. They're scary, they make no noise, and are extremely stealthy. Their tell is a red laser and a loud noise when about to be shot. They are priority number 1. You need to deal with them as soon as you see them. Snipers deal incredible damage and knock you back when they shoot you. If you find yourself being shot constantly by snipers, you can equip a curio with sniper resistance to help you, or get used to dodging. Next is Trapper, a young lady with a bug collection back at the barracks. She's fast, actually has a decent amount of health, and is resistant to most but not all stagger. She runs up close and fires her net and instantly disables the nearest person and drags them to her. The disabled ally can be saved in 1 second, so immediately free whoever is disabled, otherwise they'll take damage and die. The Trapper is extremely dangerous as she has no limit to the amount of people netted and will constantly try to net people if she is alive. Kill at all costs. Second, if not first, most dangerous disabler in the game. Next is the Tox Flamer, another woman. Destroy at all costs, very dangerous. She spews a green fire that will linger on the ground. Standing in it for too long will instantly break all toughness. The Tox Flamer can't disable, but she's extremely dangerous if left alone and can make dealing with hordes a nightmare. Mutants. Mutants are loud and obnoxious. Not 100% lethal, but dangerous all the same. They have incredible stagger resistance while running, but can be dodged and avoided just as easily. If they manage to grab you, they disable you and throw you around. The first time, they throw you. Not always, sometimes they'll just throw you. The second time they grab you, however, they'll deal decent damage to you and throw you again. Try to avoid with dodges and attacks at the same time. Flamer. Slightly easier to deal with than the Tox Flamer. The fire still breaks all toughness, so be cautious. Scab Bomber. The Peyton Manning of Darktide. Dude's got an arm like a cannon. He hurls grenades at incredible distances that explode into fire. Fire that breaks all toughness. Bombers do not always throw grenades at the player. They sometimes throw grenades on objectives or paths you need to walk through. Sometimes you won't have a choice but to run through the fire, since the fire lingers longer than their throw cooldown. The Bomber can be a huge problem if left alone. He has no actual combat ability outside of the kick, and can be dealt with really easily because he has low health. And finally, the Poxburster, a slightly tanky and slightly stagger-resistant suicide bombing unit that will charge at the player to explode, dealing massive damage and corruption. If the player is down too much HP, a Poxburster can kill them immediately. They have a beautiful counter though. Yeah, that's it. It's really easy to deal with one. Otherwise, just shoot them when they're far away. And don't be one of those players that attacks them when they're close to another one. Poxbursters always explode. You can't disarm their bomb, so only shoot them when it's safe to do so, not when they're next to someone or yourself. That's all the enemies you'll commonly meet. Just don't panic and you'll be fine. Monsters, on the other hand, are a different story.
Slow as hard. Oh my god.
Monsters, or monstrosities as they're called in game, are not always present. You can go many games without seeing a single one, but currently there are 4 in game. Plague Ogryn is a green, large, corrupted Ogryn that is incredibly fast, aggressive, and can push the fight anywhere at once. His weak point's his head. Learn to dodge and learn to block while your team deals enough damage for him to swap aggro. You'll be fine. He's not that hard. The Beast of Nurgle is a different story. Regardless of what people say, this one, I don't like fighting. I dislike this one the most, but he is the easiest to deal with. Beast of Nurgle moves much slower than other monsters and can be outrun rather easily. The problem is he leaves a large pool of slime that slows movement and deals corruption damage to anyone inside it. The Beast of Nurgle's main move is the Vomit and Grab. If the beast vomits on you, you'll be slowed as long as it's on you, but unless you're standing in the vomit, you won't take more corruption damage. So it's a matter of movement. If you're vomited on and you're too close to the beast, he will grab you, making him eat you. This completely disables you and making you unable to move, and your allies have to save you. While eaten, you take 2 times as much corruption as you would have and have to pray to the big emperor in the sky your teammates are smart enough to do one of 2 things to save you. Shoot this big fucking yellow thing! That's his weak spot! Shoot this! It's not that hard! If he takes enough weak spot damage, he'll drop you. Otherwise, he needs to be staggered from an Ogryn rush or some form of extreme stagger. But the beast is stagger resistant, so the big yellow weak spot is your best chance of your allies saving you. If the beast has an enemy next to him that isn't on his radar or isn't being covered in vomit, he'll do an AoE attack that launches allies away. It can be dodged, but it's still annoying. I suggest explosives, aiming for the weak point and good movement. Otherwise, he can be a really big problem. Next is the Chaos Spawn. This one is much different than the one in Vermintide 2. He leaps, he's much faster, he deals a lot of damage, and his grab can disable you. I said earlier enemies can't heal, but this one's the exception. This one is a bit of a hassle. His weak spot is incredibly hard to hit, as he never stops moving, and it's incredibly small. I suggest simply just hitting the shit out of it. You know, like you're supposed to be doing. You can try to shoot him in the head, but ultimately your main goal should just be to beat the fuck out of him. Luckily, the Chaos Spawn is weak to stagger and explosives. He can be bullied by Ogryn's good movement and stamina management. And lastly, the Demon Host. She is a beast. Not to be confused with the actual beast. The Demon Host is akin to the Witch from Left 4 Dead. Avoid it. Simply just leave it alone. There's no rewards for killing bosses at this time, so don't even bother unless you need the achievement for killing one. The Demon Host has 3 stages: dormant, alerted, and awake. If she's dormant, just walk around her. She's no threat. If she's alerted, you did one of 2 things. You got too close to her, or you shot her. It's okay. Just leave her alone. Get away from her while she's alerted and you'll be fine. And lastly is awake. If awake, she'll break her shackles and prioritize the person who woke her up. She will teleport to the target and relentlessly attack them while simultaneously dealing 4 times corruption damage to all allies in her AoE while she's mad. If she manages to take down the person that woke her up, she will pin them and slowly raise them up until they die. She will then randomly focus a second person and do it again. She can instantly kill 2 people before leaving the map. There are a handful of ways of dealing with her. 1, leave her the fuck alone. Don't bother. Don't shoot her. Don't get close to her. Walk around her. It's not that hard. Just leave her the fuck alone. 2, beat the fucking shit out of her. Your allies, if she's focusing you, should focus her while she's focusing you. It's going to require a lot of footwork and a lot of blocking and stamina management, but you're playing defense while she's wailing on you. And if an Ogryn brings a slab shield, the slab shield special move is Fortify. The Ogryn can be completely immune to melee damage while fortified. This includes the Demon Host, turning her encounter into kind of a joke, since she can't hurt him, and she won't stop until he's dead, and if he can't die, she won't leave him alone, leaving the team to just kind of wail on her for free. The enemies of Atoma are thick and plentiful. There's many different ways of dealing with them, and I don't mind showing you how I do it. I'm going to show you weapons and builds. At the end of the day, it ain't no Thunderhammer.
I need assistance! Cast you to hell! I am your doom! Stupid!
You guys like that? Keep in mind, I'm going to be talking to you as if you're level 30. I can't help you if you're lower than this, so focus on leveling if you're new. That's your job right now. Let's talk about crafting an armory. It's not that great, and it needs work. I'm not here to talk about that though. I'm just here to help. Brunt's armory has 2 tabs, his refreshing selection and his regular armory. The selection has random weapons and curios that are different prices, qualities, and rarities. I completely ignore this. It's got stuff I might not want, stuff I might not even care about. The armory has every weapon your current level has access to. If you're level 30, it's all unlocked. When you buy something from the armory, it's always gray, and it's given random stats. If you have the spare cash, buy a bunch until you see a weapon that has stats that you want. There's no way to change these stats at all. Once they're on the weapon, that's it. The maximum amount a weapon can have is up to 80%. They can never reach 100. Why? I don't know. And I'm not going to defend it. A weapon with 80 in everything but low in one thing is not bad. That's good. The ideal weapon should be something like this, where it's high 70s or high 80s across the board. I call these unicorns. When you have what you want, don't get rid of all your spare weapons, keep them for now. Go across the way to Hadron. Mommy Tech Priest will offer you upgrades. Consecrate your weapons to bring you from gray to green, to blue, to purple, and to gold. Greens come with 1 perk, blues come with 1 perk and a blessing, purple comes with 2 perks and 1 blessing, and golds have 2 perks and 2 blessings. You need plasteel and diamantine to upgrade your weapons. You can find these by doing missions. Currently in the game's state, it's kind of a pain in the pussy to get materials. I suggest high-level quick plays as they offer a material and a reward bonus. If you have enough materials and money to get a weapon to gold, you're almost done. If you like your blessings, good. If you like your perks, double good. You don't need to touch this weapon. If you don't like your benefits, you'll have to make some choices. You can choose to swap any of these benefits, but only 2. There are 4 bonuses, and swapping one will lock the other one on the other side. It's a little confusing, so let me explain. If you swap out both your perks, both of your blessings will be locked. If you swap out both your blessings, both your perks will be locked. If you swap out 1 perk and 1 blessing, whatever was not changed will be locked. Locked as in you can't change it on that weapon anymore and it's permanently a part of that weapon. Is it dumb? Absolutely! But that's how it is. You can swap your perks to any benefit of your choice from the start, but your blessings have a caveat. That's why I said keep your other weapons. Even if they're shit, it's okay. Just keep them. Upgrade them to blue or gold and you'll get the blessing. Upgrading them to blue grants 1 blessing and upgrading them to gold grants the 2nd. Go to earn blessing and you can sacrifice the weapon in exchange for permanently unlocking the blessing for any future weapon of that type. Just making this clear, selecting a blessing to sacrifice will destroy the weapon forever in exchange for permanently unlocking this blessing in the future for that type of weapon. Upgrading it to gold can yield a better blessing, but you don't have to if you don't have the materials. Don't worry about it. Refine swaps perks, and re-bless swaps blessings. Make your choices carefully as they're permanent. However, the things you change can be changed again in the future if you're not happy. Those can be swapped indefinitely. But locked perks are locked forever and can never be changed again. So if you don't like a blessing or a perk that you swapped before, you can swap it again in exchange for some materials. But something that's been locked, that's gone forever. And that's the armory and weapons. I'm now ready to show you how I play this game on Damnation level 5, the hardest difficulty with the highest health enemies and the hardest hitting ones, starting with Ogryn. Ogryn is the king of crowd control and horde destruction. Ogryn is reliable, lovable, and friendly. He's a little dim, but don't be mean to him. Ogryn's weapons have immeasurable cleave, stagger, and heavy damage. Ogryn also has a small passive that makes him immune to interruption during interactions. You can revive allies and do objectives without being stopped. This means you're the most helpful objective-based class in the game with your incredibly high health pool. However, this doesn't mean you're indestructible. The class rework gave the Ogryn incredible strength and durability, along with a lot of useful tools to point him in the right direction, including making his weapons much stronger. I suggest using the shovel, the bully cleaver, and the slab shield. Ogryn's 3 blitz are his rock, phenomenal at killing specials and anything not wearing armor. Along with the fact that it comes back every minute, it's never truly empty, but the fact it's free and you can't take grenades means other classes who do need them won't be fighting for your refills, so it's helpful in a team sense too. The grenade box. Wonderful with its immense stagger and horde control, it also comes with a lot of direct damage too. Don't be afraid to throw it at specials. The OSFG, the Ogryn-sized frag grenade, is the largest explosive in the game, and it can be made even bigger with a perk. Despite the fact it only has 1 use before restocking, it is a wonderful horde clear tool. It doesn't do very much damage to armor or monsters, but it is unmatched in its horde control potential. Ogryn's passives are 10% heavy damage increase, 20% toughness regen, and 20% more damage to suppressed enemies. His actives make being the walking wall a great time. Ogryn's trample can give the Ogryn wonderful horde control, stunning not only grunts, but Ogryns and a lot of them too. This ability will only stop once the max length is reached or you run into a monstrosity. It can be upgraded to grant toughness per hit, bleed enemies on hit, or grant a damage bonus per enemy hit. Ogryn's taunt is phenomenal at taking the heat off of others. It can be upgraded to make enemies take more damage, or each staggered enemy grants 2.5% of your cooldown, and you can increase the radius. Ogryn's point-blank barrage is great at suppressing gunners and clearing hordes. Can be upgraded to deal more close quarters damage, deal extra rending, or burn any enemy shot while the ability is active. Ogryn has 3 keystones. Keystones are just an extra passive. They're really good. Consider investing into them. Heavy Hitter grants more heavy attack damage per stack, and stacks can be granted by simply using a heavy attack. Feel No Pain grants a stack every 10 seconds that grants damage reduction per stack. Lucky Bullet has a small chance to fire a shot that takes no ammo, but grants cooldown reduction, and the bullet is a guaranteed crit. These are the skills and weapons I'd use on all 3 playstyles. Ogryn's weapons are the strongest for crowd control, and his guns give the highest suppression in the game. Ogryn is incredibly weak against gunfire though. Not only gunners, but anything with a gun. Ogryn using his dodge and sliding dodge is his most useful gunfire avoiding skill. Positioning is very important on Ogryn, since Ogryn is too big to use regular cover. He can't crouch behind normal cover that other classes can. Ogryn's ranged weapons run on the motto accuracy by volume. His weapons aren't accurate, they just do damage in a cone rather than a line. If gunner weapons are a letter addressed to someone, Ogryn weapons are to whom it may concern. This means a couple things. Ogryns are not meant to take out snipers or long-range enemies. It doesn't mean they can't, it means they're not built for it. Long-range accuracy is not what they're equipped for, so manage this wisely and communicate with your team about enemies from afar. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty as Ogryn, as he has 2 passives that I personally use to make him the toughest of the tough. With both of these equipped, using your heavy attack at all will generate a quarter of your toughness, excluding ally cohesion or even toughness on kill. Heavy attacks are Ogryn's bread and butter. Use them with the correct patterns to deal with either a few enemies or a lot of them. Positioning is incredibly important. Positioning on every class is super important, but even more so on Ogryn. I'm not saying that you shouldn't frontline as him, but you need to be careful on where you stand. Try to stay in the front, but the side of the front. Currently, as of this video, there's no friendly fire in Darktide, but people shooting at a horde will get their bullets blocked because you're in the way. Try to get to the side of the horde to draw aggro, just to stay out of the way of friendly fire. Ogryn is a wonderful superclass that benefits from staying together and being smart, even if he isn't. If you want more tips on Ogryn that I didn't cover here, or you want just a little bit more just so you can understand how great the big guy is, go to the Steam guides for Darktide and look up the Ogrynomicon. Those guys are insane and listed even more tips than I'll ever be able to manage. They did a wonderful job and deserve all the credit that they can get. Next is our Emperor's #1 fan, the Zealot, a fast, heavy-hitting DPS character that specializes in survivability, high damage, and close combat superiority, and their love for the big E. Unlike the Ogryn, their health pool is lower, but the Zealot's survivability is more risk versus reward, consistently being on the front line and useful to your team by cutting a hole through specialists and enemies. Doing this rewards the Zealot significantly more toughness than other classes. Since Zealot has a lot of ways to refresh his toughness, he's the class that can survive the most melee hits in a direct frontal assault. With this class in mind, he's given some of the highest cleaving weapons in the game, such as the Eviscerator, the Thunderhammer, and even the Heavy Sword. These weapons have immense cleave and great special attacks, such as the Eviscerator's Rev and the Thunderhammer's Electric Charge. His Blitz consists of an incredibly useful stun grenade with a huge AoE that freezes in place all enemies except monsters. A fire grenade with a generous AoE that damages all enemies for the duration they're inside and shortly after they leave it. Now, there's no friendly fire in Darktide. This fire is literally friendly fire. It cannot hurt you or allies, but to make sure no one freaks out and assumes it's a bomb or grenade, communicate with your team that it's a friendly one. The best way to tell the difference between a friendly Molotov fire and bomber fire is the height and color of the flames. Friendly fire is close to the ground and more bright yellow, whereas enemy fire is extremely tall and bright red. And lastly, his throwing knives. The knives are unique since they aren't a grenade, but they're far from useless. They deal immense damage to weak spots and are refilled 2 ways, ammo packs or killing an elite or special with a melee strike. They are the easiest to fill up, with 12 in reserve. The knives do little to no damage to flak and carapace armor, but anything not wearing a helmet will die. Zealot's passives are kind of interesting. 15% toughness damage reduction, allies in coherency are cured of corruption to the nearest wound, or your coherency counts as 2. 2 of them incredibly useful. useful. The third, not so much. It constantly lets you generate toughness as your coherency always counts as 2. So that's a slight benefit, but your passives are coherency based. They're meant to help the team, not just yourself. Zealot's 3 abilities are Fury of the Faithful, a dash that replenishes half your toughness, grants a critical hit, deals extra 25% damage, and after the recent class overhaul, 10 seconds of 25% attack speed. It can be upgraded to dash twice, effectively filling up your toughness in 2 button presses. Next is Chorus of Spiritual Fortitude. I'm just gonna call this the Relic. The Relic is amazing and a mandatory pick for any supportive person. The Relic pulses 7 times in a large radius, granting 20 toughness per pulse and overcapping your toughness up to a maximum of 100. This means it fills your toughness to maximum, then gives you more over your cap. But not just you, your allies as well. As long as you have yellow toughness, melee hits will not damage your health. The Relic comes with 3 upgrades that makes it even better. It can stagger any and all enemies, including monsters, for every pulse. Editor's note, a recent patch note, which might or might not be official as of this video's upload. The first and last stagger is the one that staggers bosses. Before it was all of them, but not this one. Then you can choose between granting 25% toughness damage resistance or 15% more damage dealt when the 5th pulse procs. This also spreads to your allies. The Relic isn't as damage focused as the other 2 actives, but its supportability is unmatched. It is the best supportability in the game. If it is off cooldown, you should be using it. Use it in hordes, use it during a boss, use it when a fucking sniper rolls by. The immense amount of toughness that it grants you will help you tank gunner hordes, and it applies to everyone. This is the best supportability in the game. Next is Shroud Field, the Rat Attack. Go invisible for 3 seconds, granting 100% finesse, 100% damage with backstabs, 100% crit chance, and 20% movement speed. This active makes the next attack do insane amounts of damage if you can master its positioning. This active mostly relies entirely on the weapon you bring. While the dash and the Relic can be used with any weapon, Shroud Field is better used with things that benefit your movement speed. Since you only have 3 seconds on default, it can be difficult to land this attack since you have to get the most out of it by hitting something from behind. The weapon I suggest the most is the knife. You can use other weapons, but the knife is the fastest weapon to combo with an ability that makes you run faster. 3 upgrades you can get is you can make the ability last 6 seconds instead of 3, or you can increase your cooldown by double, but increases the damage by another 100%. The last upgrade grants you 40% toughness regen and 20% damage reduction when the ability ends, allowing you to get a little cocky if you end up getting caught out. Zealot's 3 keystones are Blazing Piety, granting 25% crit chance every time 25 enemies die. This passive is refreshed when an enemy dies, making it possibly permanent. And Martyrdom. I do not recommend you take this keystone at all. This keystone, in its current state, as of the video's upload, it's just bad. It's not good. On paper, it's kind of interesting. Martyrdom grants 8% total damage for every wound you have that is empty or corrupted. This stacks to a total of 9 times, meaning theoretically you could have an 72% total damage bonus to everything you do. Guns, grenades, melee, all of it. There are multiple reasons why this isn't good. Toughness is one of them. Toughness, let me remind you, is not a shield. So a keystone that makes you stronger for having less health is dangerous. It's not that you can't make it work. It's that you should never be in a situation where any unpredicted or unseen enemy can lead to you going down. Your number 1 goal should be not going down at all. Next, the wound has to be empty for the stack to proc. On Damnation, a default Zealot with no skills or wounds has a maximum of 2. If you take this wound skill, that adds 2, making it 4. If you have 3 curios of +1 wound, that makes it 7. But it has to be empty. So you can't even get 7 stacks of Martyrdom. You can only get 6, because if all of your wounds are empty, you go down. This means in order to get the full benefits of Martyrdom, you need 10 wounds, and 9 of them must be empty. But if you manage to get 10 wounds, that's a waste of a curio. Having an extra wound is nice. Having 4 wounds is overkill. Remember, you're not supposed to be going down anyway. There are curios curios that help increase max toughness. There are curios that increase max HP. These help you to not go down in the first place. While I know there are people that can make martyrdom work, it's just not worth it. The third keystone is Judgment. Moving grants a stack up to 20. Dealing damage consumes the stack and grants damage, movement speed, and attack speed per stack. This is a good keystone, as it's free damage for simply running around. These are the loadouts I use for each ability. One more thing. You can do this with Shroudfield.
The righteous need no light.
God.
Look at that! Look at that! I'm the
What the
fucking
fuck?
best! Look at that! Pray! Pray! That's the Emperor right there, motherfucker! Emperor, hide my step.
You didn't get a chance.
Oh yeah,
He
he's
didn't even
dead.
fuck around, he just found out.
Yeah, no, he's just dead.
Emperor, walk with me.
Anyways,
If you get a good Thunderhammer and Shroudfield, if you activate your special and charge a heavy attack, a well-placed invisible backstab can one-shot every boss. This is not easy, and it is very easy to fuck up and miss. But when it works, oh yeah. Time to unveil the Emperor's most dangerous schizophrenic. The Psyker is a specialist focus class. His job is not meant to focus crowds, but to remove elites from the battle. He's equipped with many different elite focus, cooldown reduction, and crit related perks. His damage can be immense or really little if built incorrectly. Psyker is the only class that I suggest to pick one side and stick to it. If you're going to stick to the left, the middle, or the right, stay to that lane. If you're going crit chance, cooldown, or extra elite damage, stick to stacking these benefits, as they all work in tandem with each other. Psyker is an incredibly dangerous class to both the enemy and the player. When Psyker uses his abilities, he gains peril. Once reaching 100% peril, any more generation will cause him to explode, forcing him to go down. Be extremely careful when playing Psyker, as he's also not a very good melee focus class. This isn't to say he can't hold his own as a melee class, he's just significantly stronger when he doesn't have to be close to anything. His swords and weapons are strong, sure, but his staffs are stronger and safer, including the Void Strike, the Trauma Staff, or the Surge Staff. He's also got the Chain Sword, the Four Swords, and the Dueling Swords. Alternatively, you can choose to use guns as Psyker, but I don't think you should. I don't really recommend it. Not in its current state anyway. It's not that Gun Psyker isn't good, but because his alternatives are better. Psyker's staffs have infinite use as long as you manage the peril. Using a gun requires ammo that can run out, but you're taking ammo from your allies that can definitely use it better than you can. Just for clarity's sake, you can run a gun on Psyker, but it's a weaker playstyle than his normal one. Not even damage-wise, but you'll see what I mean. Psyker's 3 blitz are Brain Burst, Smite, and Assail. Brain Burst is a slow charging immense damage single target attack that bypasses all armor and one-shots most of the specials, not including the Ogryns. Brain Burst has no range limit and is entirely dependent on what you're looking at, perfect for removing snipers and even dealing huge damage to bosses from a safe distance. Smite is a special utility focused blitz. It's chain lightning that stuns enemies and deals incredibly low damage. It does not work on monsters, but stuns entire hordes and elites in huge droves. Even mutants can be staggered once they've been hit enough with it. Smite's range is not that big, but its chain and horde control are unmatched, just like its utility. A Smite Psyker can hold hordes back almost as good as any Ogryn, the difference being the Ogryn will actually kill them. Smite's damage is pathetically low and should not be used to kill, but to hold in place, making crushers Ravagers, mutants, and large portions of poxwalkers stand completely still for allies to take down with zero risk. Assail is Psyker's strongest blitz as of this video's upload. Assail is Yondu's arrow from Guardians of the Galaxy. It's a weak spot aimed crystal that kills almost anything without a helmet. Its damage is immense and you can throw many of them. They are viable at all ranges, give or take extreme distances, and are blocked by cover. Assail can be used to clear hordes, kill elites, and even replace your weapons entirely since the cooldown is so low. The downside is Assail does no damage to armor and does low damage to monsters. While Brain Burst is still the most damaging blitz in Psyker's roster, Assail can clear hordes better than most Zealots or Ogryns, can take out faraway enemies, and even proc skills that involve weak spot damage since Assail always aims for the head. Assail is very strong, but be very careful of the peril generation and low monster and armor damage, and it's incredibly versatile across the board. Psyker's passives are 10% extra damage to elites, 10% cooldown reduction to all allies, and all allies gain 4% crit chance. These passives complement the side that they're attached to. Brain Burst plus elite damage makes it even more powerful than before, and Assail plus crit chance means more crits on weak spots. Psyker's abilities are Venting Shriek, Helicine Shield, and Scryer's Gaze. Venting Shriek pushes all enemies away and quells 50% of peril generated. It can be upgraded to vent more peril per enemy hit with the shout, deal Soul Blaze damage, or deal flat damage. A side note for Venting Shriek that's not listed anywhere, Shriek can be used to save you in case you cast too much energy. If you're going to explode, use your Shriek in case of an emergency to save you. Helicine Shield is next. This new ability is a wall or dome that can be placed by Psyker to block all bullets and projectiles fired by enemies. This includes, but is not limited to, bomber grenades, sniper bullets, trapper nets, and Beast of Nurgle Vomit. If you choose the left path upgrade of the shield, it stuns all enemies that walk into it as if it was a normal wall. Allies can shoot through it though. You also get a second shield to place down in a nice connected wall. If you choose the right side, it becomes a supportive dome. It doesn't stun enemies anymore, but instead it covers an immense area that generates a large amount of toughness per second while everyone is inside, and even more once the shield dissipates. The dome is my personal preference, but the stun on the wall is no joke. The only enemy it doesn't stun is bosses, and Scryer's Gaze. I'm joking, but I don't really like Scryer's Gaze. I don't suggest you use it. I see its value, but it's not as helpful as the shield or the insta-vent. When activating Scryer's Gaze, you gain 10% damage and 20% crit chance immediately. For every second Scryer's is active, you gain 1% damage that stacks up to a maximum of 30, totaling out to a 40% total damage bonus across the board. But while Scryer's is active, your peril will slowly generate. Once your peril reaches 100, the ability turns off entirely. It won't kill you, but any energy that you use while at 100 will make you explode. I don't recommend using any blitz or stabs or any energy at all with Scryer's activated. Scryer's Gaze is actually meant for gun psychers. It gives you incredibly high crit chance and your damage goes up with no magic being used. It's a nice damage increase. But while gun psycher is a viable playstyle, it is restricting, as I've explained before. Psyker's Keystones are game changers. Literally. Psyker's Keystones are Warp Siphon, Empowered Psionics, and Disrupt Destiny, I guess. Warp Siphon grants stacks of warp. Every stack can increase damage or reduce peril generation. If you use an ability with any stacks, it will consume the stacks and refund cooldown on the ability, meaning more shrieks, more domes, and you can use the gaze again, I guess. Empowered Psionics is a great passive. Psionics makes all of the Psyker's blitz better. Empowered Brain Burst costs 0 peril, casts 50% faster, and has 50% more damage attached to it. Empowered Smite does 30% more damage and spreads 25% faster to enemies. Empowered Assail costs no peril and increases the base damage. It's not a huge amount. It takes a stack for every knife you throw. It's not a very strong benefit, so I don't suggest you combo them. And finally, Disrupt Destiny. As of this video's upload, I don't recommend this at all. Not because it's for gun psychers, that's fine, but because the ability doesn't fucking work. Every second, a random enemy within 25 meters will be marked. Killing the enemy grants 10% toughness, 20% movement speed, and adds a precision bonus for 15 seconds. Every stack of Disrupt Destiny grants 1% damage, 2% crit damage, and 2.5% weak spot damage. This can stack up to 15 times. This is a very very good keystone that makes Gun Psyker an incredibly valuable playstyle, as it turns braced weapons that can't aim accurately, like the Shredder pistol or the braced auto guns, into literal laser beam bullet hoses. But the ability rarely marks enemies. I've had games where there are non-stopped marked enemies, and I've had games with 0 marked enemies. These are the builds that I would recommend on Psyker. Psyker is a medium to long-range special killer and utility-focused supportive player. He's incredibly strong, and his voice actors and actresses are really, really funny. Understand what he can and can't fight correctly, and you'll be fine. Finally is the heart and soul of the Empire, Cadia's breath and spine, the first to respond and the last to die, the Veteran! A crack shot midliner with focus on ranged and the strongest cohesion passive in the game. Veterans are widely regarded as the most useful class in the game, as they're a ranged focus class. This doesn't mean you can't be a melee veteran. As of the recent overhaul, melee veteran is extremely strong, but his power comes from his skills focusing on range damage. The most annoying and oppressive enemies in the game are gunners and the ranged scabs and dregs, as they are incredibly accurate and dangerous at any distance they can see you. Veteran can make himself immune to all suppression, and his toughness can be increased and replenished quickly and heavily with his ranged weapons, in order to focus all gunners on the field, making your allies safer by proxy. Veteran's Blitz are Shredder grenades, huge AoE that cause bleeding to all enemies damaged, crack grenades, sticks to carapace and flak armor, and has a smaller explosion AoE, but its damage is greater and more intense, like real crack in low-income neighborhoods, and smoke grenades. Locks line of sight, and enemies inside of it are affected with an accuracy debuff. Don't bother. Veteran has one passive. Survivalist grants 1% total ammo for every elite and specialist enemy killed. Take this. Always. Never don't take this. There is literally 0 downsides to it, and it's the best in the game. His other significantly worse passives are 3% more damage to all allies and 5% movement speed to all allies. While nice and cute, regenning ammo for simply killing something, and even on damnation, where there's a lot of them, is intense. Veteran is the king of self-reliance. His skills let him regenerate, or just not use ammo at all, and generate grenades. There's also a skill currently that heals corruption when using a med pack, and he can get grenades from ammo crates. Veteran's 3 abilities are Executioner's Stance, allowing Veteran to tag all ranged enemies and all elites for himself and the whole team. On top of this, it grants 25% more range damage, 25% more weak spot damage, and reduces your spread and recoil. Killing a highlighted enemy refreshes the duration of this ability. Technically, if the environment is target rich, this ability can last permanently if you're doing your job. And since the cooldown is only 25 seconds, there's no reason to not always have this ability ready, especially since it highlights all enemies for allies as well. His second ability is Voice of Command. Veteran shouts immediately, maxing out his toughness, even from 0, and like the relic, overcaps your toughness, but only by 50, and applies to all allies. Veteran's third ability is Infiltrate. I'm kind of indifferent to this skill. Replenish all toughness, enter stealth for 6 seconds, gain 25% movement speed, and leaving stealth suppresses all enemies. Infiltrate is a really expensive skill. I think it's the only one in the game that has 4 upgrades attached to it. 4 that you can all take at once at least. I agree this ability is designed to flank and get around enemies to provide a more stealthy approach to Veteran. Problem is, the other 2 abilities are drastically superior. The shout and tag are unmatched, and Infiltrate implies you're supposed to leave your team at some point, when you're not supposed to be far from your squad at all. And finally, Veteran has no keystones. I don't know why. I'm not saying it's good or bad. He just doesn't. At the end of Veteran's trees, there's just new passives that he gets for picking them. I believe it's this way since Veteran skill trees are actually really expensive. Be very careful when picking Vet. He has a lot of variety, but he is really hard to put a niche amount of points into. These are the loadouts I have for a ranged and melee Veteran. I don't use Infiltrate because I don't like it. Veteran, in my opinion, is currently the most useful backup class in the game. I suggest heavily mastering headshots and sticking together with your team. He's a great class that benefits by countering ranged enemies and replenishing his munitions through combat. Whew, that was one hell of a script read. I hope this guide to Darktide has helped you learn something. If you did, consider supporting me on Patreon. I stream on YouTube almost every day except Sundays. That's the Lord's Day. If you would like to purchase my own brand of energy drink, make sure to use code JFJ for 10% off your order at gamersubs.gg/JFJ. My flavor is apple pie. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful day, and praise the Emperor!